All right, everyone, welcome to our week 3 live classroom. We are finally going to start programming for real this week. We're going to start writing HTML, and it is going to be awesome. Before we get started today, we are going to do a spiritual thought. After that, Randy, would you be up for saying our opening prayer for us?
Yeah, that's fine.
Awesome, thank you. So our spiritual thought today is a little late, I admit. So last week with Come Follow Me, we were focused on a little bit of Joseph Smith history and section 2 of the Doctrine and Covenants. Now, section 2 of the Doctrine and Covenants is a really interesting one because it's only 3 verses long, and the entire thing is like less than a single verse in Joseph Smith history. So it's really small, but with that said, it includes in it the beginning and the end of the plan of salvation. And without the content in section 2 that we learn from there, our Heavenly Father would not be able to perform his work and his glory. And so today, we're going to watch a video, just a 3-minute video on the blessings of family history. So let me go ahead and share my screen. This video really touched me, which is why I wanted to share it today.
While temple and family history work has the power to bless those beyond the veil, it has an equal power to bless the living. It has a refining influence on those who are engaged in it.
This is how you and I become saviors on Mount Zion. There is a joy and satisfaction that is only understood through spiritual feelings. We are linked to them forever.
As an apostle of the Lord Jesus Christ, I leave my blessing upon you with a promise that if you look beyond the bonds of time and mortality and help those who cannot help themselves, you will be blessed with more closeness and joy in your family and with the divine protections afforded those who are faithful in his service.
As you respond in faith to this invitation, your heart shall turn to the fathers. The promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob will be implanted in your hearts. Your patriarchal blessing with its declaration of lineage will link you to these fathers and be more meaningful to you. Your love and gratitude for your ancestors will increase. Your testimony of and conversion to the Savior will become deep and abiding.
You'll find not only protection from the temptation and ills of this world, but you'll also find personal power, power to change, power to repent, power to learn, power to be sanctified, and power to turn the hearts of your family together and heal that which needs healing.
Your own knowledge and faith in the Savior will increase, and you will receive a more certain witness that life continues beyond the veil. I know that life continues beyond the veil. I know it.
I invoke a special blessing on you, parents, you youth, and you children, that each of you will find joy and be blessed in every other aspect of your life as you fulfill the obligation that has been sent from heaven.
And I promise you will be protected against the intensifying influence of the adversary. As you participate and love this holy work, you will be safeguarded in your youth and throughout your lives.
All right, Randy, go ahead.
All right. Our dear Heavenly Father, thank you for blessing us with the opportunity to get together and learn more about HTML and programming, and we're very grateful for the opportunity the church has provided us with being able to do these online classes, and pray thy Spirit will remain with us, and we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right, you guys. Before we dive into week 3, Were there any questions from week 2? We did Robbie the Robot, learned about algorithms. Any questions from stuff you learned in week 2?
Max, go all the way upstairs. All the way upstairs.
No, for me.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, just a couple things to remember. If you have not already, be sure to put your profile picture up in Slack so we can see your face. And yeah, so let's dive into Robbie the Robot. Okay. Now this, if anyone didn't know, I'm gonna sit down real quick. Robbie the Robot, the whole thing is in JavaScript. Okay. Now we haven't really learned JavaScript yet, but we will starting next week. But I always get this question. A lot of people wonder why they could not move the robot 3 spaces forward by doing something like this. A lot of people see the parentheses here and they're like, hey, I should be able to put something in those, but it doesn't work. And here's why. Okay, just simply the way that the function is written doesn't allow it. Okay, if I wanted to write a function that would allow the robot to move forward several times, then I could say, okay, I'm going to have what's called a parameter called number of times, or I could call it anything, but it is here that we would specify a number. In this case, 3, and then I would do something called a loop. Okay, loops we'll learn about in week 8. So if you're looking at this and you're like, man, I don't know how to do this, you're probably right, you probably don't, and that's just fine. That's expected at this point in the course. But it is possible to write a function called move forward a bunch, and to say, okay, I equals 0 while I is less than the number of times. So if I wrote 3, then 3 would be a number of times. And so we would loop through this several times. So we say, well, I is equal to 0 while it's less the number of times, we'll go ahead and run the move forward function. After we execute this code inside of what we call the body of our for loop, inside these curly braces, then we'll go up here and we'll say, okay, I equals I plus 1. So I was 0, now I will be 1. And now we'll say, okay, is I less than 3? Yes, that is a true statement. So we'll move forward again. Jump up here, I plus plus, I is now equal to 2. Is 2 less than 3? Yes, it is. We move forward again. That was our 3rd time that we moved forward. Then go back up, I plus plus, we add 1 to I is now equal to 3. Is 3 less than 3? No, that is false. And then we jump out of our for loop. Okay, so move forward 3 doesn't work because the move forward function doesn't supply that option. Okay, but if I wanted to write a function, I could call it something like move forward a bunch and pass in a number, and it would look like this. Okay. All right, week 3 deliverables. We have our chapter 3 review questions. Write in HTML a business summary. Your initial submission is due tonight. I apologize that this is late. The holiday here in Idaho kind of threw us off a little bit with the schedule. But we do have that's due tonight. Hopefully today will be very helpful for you because we'll pretty much do that in different ways, but we will do a fair bit more than just that coding assignment today. Peer review Thursday, final submission due Friday, and then your self-assessment due Saturday. All right, HTML basics. Does anyone know what HTML is? When people talk about HTML?
Hypertext markup language.
Wow, Brandy, way to steal my thunder. That was awesome. Yeah, okay, so it's hypertext markup language. Technically, it's not a programming language. When we think about programming languages, we think of this, okay? A programming language allows you to do functional things. Okay, hypertext markup language is kind of like writing with a pen on a piece of paper. Okay, I can get my pen to show up on a piece of paper, but my pen in and of itself can't do math like my brain can. Okay, my pen can simply just write on a page. Okay, well, programming languages can compute stuff. So right here, I'm telling it to do something several times. I can't do that with HTML. HTML is not that smart. HTML is like my pen, and it will simply allow me to put something on a page for a user to see. All right. So anytime I'm looking at a web page, let's look at this web page. We've all seen this one a lot. Anytime I'm looking at a web page, I'm looking at HTML. Okay. I see text written. I see there's an image here. Okay. But these things in and of themselves aren't interactive. For me to be able to click on something and see a dropdown, or hover over something and see a dropdown, that's JavaScript. Okay, I couldn't do that with just HTML. For me to hover over this and see that color change when I hover over faculty right here, again, that's not just HTML. Now we're getting into some styling. We'll talk about CSS a little bit in this course, more on the side than anything. It's not a part of our intro to programming curriculum, but I will teach you guys a little bit about Cascade style sheets, which is CSS, which will allow you to, change this bar to blue or change this to black, make that green, make this big, make this color change when I hover over it. But functional things like allowing for drop downs, creating things on a page, getting data, my iNumber right here, that's a piece of data that you guys don't see. All of this is produced by JavaScript because HTML is not smart enough to do that. If we look back here, this code right here to say, okay, I want to move a robot X number of times, HTML could not do that. So let's talk about what HTML can do, because it can do a lot. And very frequently, JavaScript and HTML go hand in hand, which is why in this course, we learn about HTML in week 3, and then we'll do JavaScript for the rest of the semester. To write code, you'll need a text editor, and to run code, you'll need a browser. Okay. Technically, you can run code in a different way, but it's a lot easier to do with a browser. All right. If I have a doc file on my computer, what is a program that I could use to open my doc file?
What was the question again?
If I had a file, like a document file, like a point doc or .docx, what is a program on my computer that I could use to open that file?
To open it? Like, are you talking about like Word or?
I'm talking about Word. Exactly. Yeah. So to open a doc file, I couldn't just, I probably couldn't use a browser. That wouldn't work very well. If I have an image file, I might go to the Windows Photo program that's on my computer, or I might be able to open that in my browser. Okay, but different types of files need different types of programs to open them. All right, well, when we write HTML, we don't go to Word, we'll go to a text editor to write our HTML. Sorry about that. And then to run it, we'll go to our browser to run that code. All right, so let's look at each one of these. So HTML basics. Let's go to this. I don't think it's going to let me click on that. Let's come back out of here real quick. I'm going to follow this link. I'm just going to Google HTML tutorial. W3 Schools is the first thing that comes up, which is awesome. I love W3 Schools. And it shows what HTML looks like. This is code, okay? Meaning that it won't just display this on the page if I run it. It means that when I have something to run an HTML file, it will take something and turn it into something else that I meant it to do. So for example, right here, I have this H1 tag, which is short for header 1, my biggest header that I can have in HTML. And when I run this code in a browser, it will actually render what this is saying to do. So I'm saying, hey, this is a heading, let's put that text inside of a header. And then when it's rendered, when I actually run it, it'll be a heading. I don't see like a lesser than H1 greater than backslash. I don't see any of that stuff. All I see is this is a heading, which is beautiful, okay? Let's try this one more time. I'm gonna copy all this code and I'm going to go to a text editor. Now, our text editor that I suggested that you guys use is this one, VS Code. Let me close that. We don't care about that. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. VS Code's nice for a few reasons. One, I can have all my files open right here. It's really easy to do. All you have to do is hit File and hit Open Folder. And if I have a folder on my computer called cit160, then I could open that up and I would see all of my code inside of my cit160 folder. Now, the folder that I have open here has a lot of stuff in it from a lot of different things, okay? But among those things is my cit160 stuff. Now, let me make a new file. I'm just going to right-click on this and hit New File. And I'm just going to call this week3 class.html. Notice what I did here. It says .html. This is really, really important because for me to be able to take something that I wrote and have it be rendered by something that reads HTML, it has to be called an HTML file. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Okay, I could put this into a doc file and open it up in the browser, and I would see this on the page in my browser. Because if it's not an HTML file, it won't be able to actually render the code. It'll just spit out the code on a page, and you'll see exactly what you wrote, which is not the point of programming. But if I save this in an HTML file, and all I have to do to do that is just say .html, then I can paste it, and I'm going to hit Control S to save, or you can click on File and Save. All right, and now I have this. Okay, well, now what do I do? One of the things that I could do, I could right-click on this. Nope, I'll right-click up here on this tab where it says the file name, and I'm going to hit Copy Path. Now, what this will do, if I paste this right here, you can see this is just a folder on my C drive on my Windows computer. It is in Git, cit160, week3 class.html. It is the address of this file on my computer. Okay, that's all I copied. Now, if I take that path on my computer and I go back to my browser, I'm just going to put it up into the URL bar. Just like that, just the path. Okay, and I'm going to hit enter, and look at that. I just told my browser to run my HTML code, and it was as simple as that. Okay, we did a couple of things. One, we had a text editor, and we saved the file as an HTML file. Two, we copied the path. Three, we put the path in the URL of the browser. Same place where you put google.com. And then we run it, and it says, oh, I have an HTML file. Let me render that for you. And I can see what this looks like. We can see one thing that we didn't see before. It's kind of hard to see with my Chrome, but I can see this page title right here. Okay, that page title is coming from right here. Okay, we have our title tag that has this text, page title. If I change this to week3 class and hit save, I can just come back to my browser and hit F5 to refresh. And you can see this title changed to week3 class. Okay, and then this is also here because I pasted it. I'm going to take that out. Okay. Now, there are a couple of things that I don't really like about this setup right now. HTML is built with what we call tags. Okay, we have a doc type tag, we have an HTML tag, a head tag, title tag, head, body, oops, H1P, body, HTML. Now, there are several different types of tags, but the majority of them have an opening tag and a closing tag. The only difference is the closing tag has a / before the name of the tag. So if I look at this, I can see I have a title opening tag and a title closing tag. I have an H1 opening tag and an H1 closing tag. If I neglect to put this H1 closing tag there, watch what happens. I took it off, which is incorrect. As far as HTML goes, I would get an error if I did like an HTML validator because I need to have a closing tag. But my browser is going to try to fix my mistake. It's like, oh man, this guy forgot his closing tag. Let's just not close it. So I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to hit F5. And now look, now it thinks the whole thing is in that H1 tag because I never closed it. Even though if I look back here, this paragraph is clearly a paragraph, but it doesn't look like it anymore. It looks like a heading because I didn't close it. It's thinking, oh, okay, we reached the end of our body. Let's go ahead and close it right here because he forgot to close it. All right, so it's really important to close these. Now, there are a couple of them that don't have closing tags. There's one even right here, all right, and that is this doc type HTML. There's just a tag and it doesn't close. There are very few of these, all right, but a couple of them that you might see, there's a break, whoops, which just looks like, it looks just like this. And if I put this here, watch what'll happen. I'm gonna come back over here and I'll hit refresh or F5. And all it did was it just bumped my paragraph down another line. It's like if I hit enter in a Word doc, it'll just bump it down a little bit lower. So if I put a few breaks right here, I just hit Control C to copy the line and Control V a bunch of times to paste it. And I hit F5, you can see I just added a few lines right here. Okay, so that's one of our tags that doesn't require, one of our HTML elements that doesn't require a closing tag. There are a few more, we'll look at a couple of them today, but they are outside of the norm, okay? The majority of them will have an opening and a closing tag, just like you see with this paragraph. Now, one thing that I don't like with this is that it's hard to see where some of my tags start and end. For example, this title is actually inside of another tag. Can you guys see what tag my title element is inside of?
It would be the head tag.
Yeah, it's really hard to see, but look, here's the opening tag for head, and here's the closing tag for head. Technically, it's also inside of our HTML element. Okay, so anytime we have this, we call these nested HTML elements. Okay, and anytime I have that, I like to go here and just hit tab to tab it over to say, hey, this is actually inside of another element. So I would do the same thing with everything inside of HTML also, because all of this is inside of HTML. And I would do this with everything inside of body, because it's all inside of body as well. Okay, now if I look at this, just by adding a couple of tabs, it's really easy to see what is inside of other HTML elements. Now this doesn't change anything. Okay, if I hit tab like 50 times over here, this will not change the appearance of this heading at all. Watch, I'll hit refresh. It's in the exact same spot. It didn't move it. HTML is not picky about where you put spaces and tabs. For example, let's say I wanted to add a new line right here. Hitting enter will not do it. Okay, I just put about 100 lines of empty space in here. I'm gonna hit save and come over here and hit refresh. Nothing, because I didn't write any code to say break. Now, if I had put that break line of code in there 100 times, then this paragraph would have been off the page and I would have had to scroll down to it. But as it is, HTML doesn't care about what space I put into my program. And so it doesn't actually render any of that. It's just here for my own sanity. For like, this is not good for my sanity. I would not like to have this over here. Instead, I would like to have it right here. So I can clearly see what's inside of the body, where it's at. If I had a paragraph and let's say inside of my paragraph, for whatever reason, I had like a different header. Okay, I'd say this is another header. Now, some people are just fine with this being written like this. All right, with having multiple tags alongside each other, inside of each other on the same line. And if I go back here and run it, you can see it actually added a new line because it's a header. That's part of what a header is it kind of makes itself its own thing. But if I go ahead and break this up and I say, oh, okay, that's inside my paragraph, that's inside my paragraph, and then my paragraph closes. You can see my text editor even helped me out with that. I hit enter after the P tag opening, and it went ahead and just hit tab for me. And I hit enter after this H3 closed, and it went ahead and put this back on the same line, which is really nice. But I'll hit save here and I'll hit refresh, and it didn't change it at all. So this is kind of a different mindset because we are used to seeing things in Word docs. And if we add space, it's just space. Nothing is getting rendered. Well, right now we're writing code. And if we want something to get rendered, we have to write code to make it get rendered. Spaces and tabs in HTML aren't going to do anything except for make it nice to look at. So it's easy for us to understand. It's easy for us to see where things are at. Okay, so let's look at some HTML elements and what comprises an HTML element. So this whole thing is an element. If I go back to my code, this whole thing is an element. This whole thing is an element. This whole thing is an element because it's all part of my paragraph tag. Looking at this, we have the tag name, which comes right after our lesser than sign. Then we have an attribute name and an attribute value. An attribute name, attribute value. Now, my tags right now, my HTML elements that we have written don't have any attributes, which is just fine, okay? If I wanted to add an attribute, let's say I wanted to give this, say, a name, for example, I could say, this is awesome, okay? Now this attribute will say something about this H1 tag. It's not gonna print this is awesome to the page. If I come back out of here and I look at this and I hit refresh, nowhere on here is there this is awesome written. Now, different attributes in HTML will do different things, and we'll talk about all of those. One that you're going to see a lot is this ID. All right. If you think about an ID, if you think about like your student ID with BYUI, the reason why it exists is to uniquely identify you as a student here at BYUI. It is very likely that there are other people here at BYUI with my name, or that live in the same city, or that have, or in the same ward that I was in, or something like that. So very frequently with programs, we will have unique identifiers for different pieces of data. In this case, we're the pieces of data and we all have a unique ID. Well, in HTML, if I want to uniquely identify an HTML attribute or element, then I can use an ID. Okay. The text inside of an element is just what is between the opening tag and the closing tag. Two big things I want you to notice here. One, which tag has the attributes?
The opening.
The opening tag. I will never, ever put attributes on a closing tag, ever. The only thing a closing tag will ever get is a / before the name of the tag. That's it, okay? And then all of our attributes, anything we want to do with our element will go into the opening tag, okay? Any questions on this, you guys? Sweet. All right, common HTML elements. We are not going to use all of these. These are very common, but I don't think we're ever going to use a canvas in this class. I think you'll use everything else though, actually. So we have the doc type HTML. This is the document type declaration that must appear at the top of all HTML5 documents. Anytime I say HTML, I'm referring to HTML5, just so you guys know. Technically, this declaration is not a tag, so it has no closing tag. This guy right here, lesser than, ! dash. This starts a comment in your code. So, and remember when I said that I could put a bunch of entries right here and it wouldn't do anything because that isn't going to be rendered when I run an HTML file? Well, I can also put in something called a comment, which is started like that. Okay. Now this is, I could say, is like the starting part of a comment and the ending part of a comment. So if I moved this down here, okay, I just made this whole thing a comment. If I saved this and came over here, I'm gonna move this in a different window and hit F5, look, my heading's gone because I just put it into a comment. Comments are not rendered by the computer or our browsers. They're just there for our benefit. And when I say our, I mean the programmer, okay? I can put anything I want for a comment. I could say, this is C#. This is not C# code. This is HTML, but it doesn't care about this because it's a comment and it's not going to run. Okay, it's just there for me. I could say, this is the first part of my web page. Okay, it's kind of just a note for me to be able to see and use as I like. All right, and so that's how we do a comment in HTML. It's kind of funky looking. Notice though, in my text editor, when I typed in lesser than ! dash, it went ahead and completed it for me. And now I could just start typing here. Okay, and that's just a comment. Let's look at our next one, the HTML tag. So notice the HTML tag that I got from W3 Schools does not have any attributes. This HTML tag right here has one attribute called leng with a value called enus. Notice my file is running just fine without this leng attribute. Okay. Now it would run just fine with this as well, but our browsers have gotten to the point where they kind of know that we want it to use English if that's what we want, and so it'll default to that for us. Okay. The head marks the start and end of the HTML document. Every HTML document must have one head. The head contains info such as the title and author of the document and most JavaScript code. So right now, the head only has a title, but I could put a bunch of stuff in here. We talked about a meta tag. All of our meta tags will go in here. It said it will contain most of our JavaScript. All of our JavaScript will go inside of a script tag. If I wanted to add a bunch of style to my document, I could put a style tag, okay? And so the head kind of functions as the settings of my HTML file, if you will, okay? And so, the title isn't rendered on the page. Instead, it shows up in the tab. If I have JavaScript, I can write it here. If I have styles, I can write them here. And so the head is kind of like where we put our settings for the file. Meta provides information about a document such as author descriptions, keywords, and the character encoding. No closing tag. Okay, so here's another one that doesn't have a closing tag. Notice when I typed in meta, it didn't do a closing tag. But if I type in like paragraph, it typed in the closing tag for me. Thank you, VS Code. So that's really helpful. If you just keep an eye out for that, you'll see very easily what has a closing tag and what doesn't, because VS Code will auto-complete the closing tag for you if it exists. But like I said, there aren't very many of them. Let's see, title, we already talked about. Script, we already talked about. Body, marks the start and end of the body. Every HTML document must have one, and the body contains the main information of a document that the user will see. So if I look back at this, everything on this white spot on my screen is the body of my HTML document. Everything. Okay. If I want something for the user to see, it'll go in this white spot on my page, and that is inside of the body. Okay. No exceptions. H1 is a level 1 heading. There are 6 different headings numbered from H1 to H6. H1 is the biggest, H6 is the smallest. Let's see what an H6 looks like. I'm just going to put a 6 there for the opening and closing tag. And I have an HTML error in here. I'm going to put this paragraph into a paragraph. Oops. And save. Okay. I'm going to hit refresh. So this is H3, and let's look at H6. There's H6. So it's even smaller than a paragraph. Okay, by default. Now I could change all these styles if I wanted to. I said I'd talk to you guys a little bit about CSS today. One very simple example of how I could use CSS here is by isolating an HTML attribute type inside of my style tag. So right here, I'm isolating my paragraph, and I open up a curly brace, and I'll say font size. Notice what my text editor is doing. Watch this. It recognizes that I'm inside of a style tag in HTML, and here are a bunch of styles that I can apply to my paragraphs. There's a lot here. Okay, I'm going to change the font size, and I'll say 500 pixels, or I could say like 500%. That might be easier to think about. All right, I'm going to hit save. Now watch what happens when I refresh this. Boom. It's not a header, it's a paragraph, but I told the paragraph to be 5 times its size. Okay, and so yes, this is a tiny header. If I wanted to make it bigger, I could. And if I wanted to make it smaller, I could. So you can do pretty much anything you want to with styles. There is no limit for the most part. A div. The concept of division in HTML is very general and is simply a large, medium, or small section. A large, medium, or small section of a document. Okay, so let's go back to this. And let's say I didn't want to make every paragraph 500%. Let's say I only wanted to make my divs 500%. Well, I could come into here and I could make a divide or a division in here. And I could say div, move my closing tag to the other side of paragraph. Okay, and so all of this is inside the paragraph, but I have a style applied to a div that says I'm going to make the font size of every div 500%. Okay, now watch this. Okay, F5, and here's my paragraph. Paragraph's massive because it's inside that div. Even though they're all inside the paragraph word itself is huge because that is inside the div where I said the 500%. Now watch this. If I take this div and I say, okay, I'm actually going to put the opening here. I'm going to put the closing down here. Okay. Now I'm saying everything inside of div is going to be 500%. The text size, it's going to be 5 times the size. So I hit F5 and there it is. All of it at 500%. So the div can be used for a lot of things. It is primarily used in styling purposes in regular web pages. You will see in this class that we're going to use it to help incorporate our JavaScript. Okay, so you don't have to worry too much about divs this week or even next week very much. But just know that they do exist. They're not super confusing. If I didn't have this style right here, the div wouldn't even really do anything. didn't do anything. Okay, it's just there. And if I wanted to do something with it, I could. Right now, it's not doing anything. All right, Canvas. JavaScript can do all sorts of stuff with a canvas. We're never going to look at it. P we already looked at is a paragraph. B and I for bold or italicized text. I could come into here and say, you know what, I want this to be bold. And I want this to be in italics. Okay, notice all my tags right here. Some people are fine with all this being on one line. Other people might prefer to have this spaced out a little bit. Okay, at this point, it's kind of a personal preference. I'm going to hit F5 and look at this. Let me zoom in on this page. Okay, this is in bold and paragraph is in italics. Okay. All right, what else do we got? Break, we already looked at. It's like hitting enter in Microsoft Word. Input makes a text field, single row where a user can enter data. So let's look at that real quick. So I'm going to come over into here and I'll just put an input. So notice my text editor, it's at work here. It has a selection at the very top. I can use my arrows to kind of like scroll through these. If I find one that I like, I can hit tab and it makes it for me. It's pretty awesome. Okay, so I have that there. If I just hit save, come back over into here and hit F5, there's my input. I can type. Okay, now this input isn't doing anything. It allows me to type. For me to actually do something with what the user types in, we would need JavaScript. Right now, it's just HTML, and we have a little spot on the page where we can type, and that's it. Next one, text area. Makes a text area multiple rows where a user can enter data. Let's go back to our text editor. And I'm going to say break because I want it to be on the next line. And then I'll start typing text area. And look what my text editor is doing. Again, it's trying to give me suggestions on what I could type. It recognizes this as an HTML file. And so look at all these HTML elements that I have. Table, T-area, T-body, TD, tem, text area, T-foot. Most of these you'll never touch. But we want text area, so I could come down into here and hit tab. And there's my text area. And it even made all these attributes for me. Maybe I don't want all these right now. Okay. This is just a simple text area. If I come over in here and hit refresh, you can see I have a spot where I can type multiple lines. Okay. Whereas this, I can't hit enter. This input's a single line and text area is potentially multiple lines. And a button makes a button that a user can click. So let's type in a button. Come over to here, hit enter. I'm just going to start typing. Okay, look at all these suggestions coming up. I type in BU and button is the first thing here. I'm just going to hit tab and there's my button. Now, if I hit save and I come over here and hit F5, here's my button. It's a pretty pathetic looking button, right? You can barely even see it. That's because I didn't put anything right here for what it's going to read there. So if I say, please press me. Okay, now I have something there. And if I hit F5, you can see that looks a little bit more like buttons that we're used to seeing. Okay. Again, there's lots of different things that you could do with style here. I could come up here into my style and I could say, okay, for every button, I want them to have a background color of, oh, that looks nice. That'll be really pretty. Hit F5, and there's my beautiful green button. Kind of reminds you of the 90s, right? It's awesome. All right. So you guys, this is HTML at its finest. Okay. This button showed up right here next to the text area because I didn't put a break here. Okay. So if I want it to show up on the next line, I can put a break, hit F5, and there it is. If I want to give it some space, I can just make 2 breaks and boom. That looks a little better. All right. With styling, if I wanted these inputs, the input and the text area to be the same size, I could come up into here and I could say input. And then I could say width is 200 pixels. Okay, and then I could come over to here and I could say text area. And I say width, 200 pixels. I hit save. Okay, and since I didn't specify anything else, these will just apply to every input and text area that I have in my document. Come back over here, hit refresh, and now they're the same size. If I wanted more space in between these, I could do what I did before, and I could just add another break. So I have 2 there to give it some nice space. And there we go. Okay. Now there's all sorts of stuff that you can do with this, obviously, because you look at websites and they look fantastic. This doesn't look very fantastic, so there's a lot that you can do with HTML. All right, case sensitivity. HTML is not case sensitive. So let's test this out. What I mean by that is I could come into here and I could make this an uppercase div, and I could capitalize this P right here. Okay. Now, if HTML is not case sensitive, the page will look exactly the same as it did before. Let's check it out. Hit F5. It's exactly the same. HTML is not case sensitive. Now, if I go into JavaScript, it is case sensitive, so don't get too cozy in your insensitive case of cases world, okay? Because as soon as we get into this script tag, everything in here is case sensitive, okay? Which isn't a bad thing. I'm just saying, if I made a variable called my name equals Nathan, okay? And then I tried to say like alert my name, okay? Notice the difference here. I have a capital N here. This is in camel case. This is all lowercase. All right. If I leave this as a capital N, so these variable names match, I hit save, come back over here, I hit refresh. Look at that alert. Look at JavaScript working on my page. It alerted my name. Okay. Well, now let's come back over here and I'm going to change this to a lowercase n and hit save and hit F5. Look at that. I'm hitting refresh and nothing's happening. My page is broken. It's hard to tell, but there's no pop-up. And if I hit F12, I can see it. There's a little red error showing up here. It says my name is not defined. And it says what line of code it is. My name is not defined. Okay. So HTML is not case sensitive, but everything inside of our script tag is JavaScript, and JavaScript is case sensitive. So just a heads up as we start thinking about next week. All right, well-formed HTML. We kind of talked about this a little bit. Document contains only standard tags and attributes. Opening tags have closing tags. And the only exceptions we have meta, break, and input. There are several more exceptions, but not many that we'll look at. Nested tags are ended before their enclosed tags are ended. Okay, so what that means is if I have an italics tag or element inside of a paragraph, it would not be good for me to end this down here. Not only is that horribly ugly, but it's not going to do what I want it to do. Okay, so anytime I have a tag inside of another tag, it has to end or close before its parent tag closes. All right, required elements, here they are. What I would recommend doing is just writing these out once and saving it in a file called like template.html. Then anytime you want to make a new HTML file, you just copy this, paste it, and you don't have to remember all these little things. I do that all the time. Today, I didn't even write up my document from scratch, and it's the first time we're learning of HTML. I just copied it from W3 Schools. VS Code does have a cool little hotkey. Let me show you guys this. So I'm going to delete everything here. Boom, it's gone. I'm hitting save. It's history. Come back over into here, hit F5. We have an empty page. At least our error's gone. That's nice. We have an empty page. Now watch this. Thank you, VS Code, for being awesome. Exclamation mark, abbreviation. Okay, it has these two suggestions. I have no idea what the second one is actually, but if you select one of these, if I'm just going to hit tab and select this first one, boom, look at that. Okay, it just like gave me this little HTML template, which is fantastic that I can work with. Okay, so again, if I have nothing here, as long as it's saved as an HTML file, this will work. I just type an exclamation mark, tab, and there's HTML. Okay, with that said, there are many things that you're going to have to do on a weekly basis in this class that aren't included in this or in this. So what I would suggest, again, is making a template.html file and you add stuff. Maybe you add your name. Maybe you add a comment. Maybe you add a paragraph or an input, because you're going to have inputs like every week. If you look at my template file, which I'll cover more next week after we've learned JavaScript, you can see I even have some styling in here to make the body of my document look good. I do have my name in here. in a meta tag in the head of my document. I also have a defining table and a function written in my script tag, which we're not really going to talk about until next week. And then I have like an input and a button and a paragraph and a div, and this is all in my template function for me to start. Anytime I start a new assignment, it's here and I can just copy. Okay. And so I would encourage you, it'll probably start off a lot more simple, maybe something like this. But as you write code, you'll be like, yeah, I'm using this like every week. I'm going to put it into my template file. And then I can just copy it every time I want to start a new file. And your template file will grow just like mine has. All right. Go through examples using a text editor, common errors, how many tags, template file, running in the browser. We already did all of that. Okay. All right. Let's do one more. Okay. I'm going to show you guys one tag that's pretty cool. All right. So I'm going to delete all this and I'm going to restart. Okay. And my restarting is I'm going to type in exclamation mark, hit enter, and here is my file. Now, if I wanted to match this to what was in the book, I totally could. But for now, I will just leave this. Okay. I'm going to say, we're going to call this display beautiful picture. Okay. Now, I'm going to test this to make sure that it works. I'm coming over to my browser. I'm going to right click on this, copy the path, come over to my browser, go to the URL, hit paste, and hit enter. Okay, and here's my HTML file. It's hard to see, but up here it does say display beautiful picture, which is what I put in the title in the head of my HTML document. Now let's come over here and we'll say we'll have an H1 tag. So I see this suggestion here. I'm just going to hit tab and then I can start typing. I'll say this is a beautiful picture. Okay, then I'm going to put a paragraph here. Again, I typed in P. I see this suggestion. I'm going to hit tab. I'm going to say this will be found on Google and displayed here. Okay, I'm going to run this again, make sure that it's working. And that looks pretty awesome. Okay. Now I just want to put a picture in here. So I'm going to Google something for us. I'm going to say HTML image. W3 Schools is usually the first thing that pops up here, but it will teach us very simply how to put an image into an HTML page. And look at this, we have an image element with a source attribute. And then alt is if for whatever reason my browser couldn't load the image, it'll show this text. Okay, and I could run this, I could look at some other examples and read more on images. You can see over here, there's a bunch of stuff. If I want to look into styles or paragraphs or CSS colors or what an ID is, like there's all sorts of stuff right here, okay? But let's go ahead and let's make an image. So I'm gonna say image, and look at that. It found it, I'm just gonna hit tab, and it made my source and alt attribute for me. I'm gonna say this is a sunset, okay? This alt tag or this alt attribute is also important for people who have some sort of disability. If they're unable to see, for example, they can't see an image, but they will have a program on their computer that could read this alt value for us. Okay. So I'm going to come over to here, hit refresh, and you can see this is a sunset with no picture. Okay, because I didn't put a source there. So let's find a sunset. I'll say beautiful sunset. Wow, is that a song? Nope. Beautiful is a song. Oh, where'd my sunset go? There we go. Wow, those are nice. I'll just do this first one. Okay, so I have all these images right here, right? Wow, I don't want that one. I'll do this one. Now, if I right click on this and hit copy image address, watch what happens if I paste this. I'm just gonna hit tab and paste it. Okay, you can see it's actually a JPEG file. All right, I'm gonna hit enter, and there's my file. Now, if I just put that same source in here, okay, it shows the URL and where it is and that it's a JPEG file. This should work for us. I'm just gonna hit save, come over into here, close all of these. I'm gonna hit refresh. And there's our image. It's kind of big, but it's pretty awesome. Okay, if I wanted to change that, if I wanted to make it smaller, I could use some simple styling. Now, I taught you guys earlier how to make a style tag up here in the head of your document. So if I wanted to modify this image, there are a couple of things that I could do. One, like we did earlier, I could type in image, and this will apply to every image in my entire document. Okay, so if I say width is 200 pixels and I hit save. Okay, when this gets rendered, it'll find every image and it'll say, okay, your width is going to be 200 pixels. Let's see if it works. That's what 200 pixels looks like. Okay, now if I had multiple images and I didn't want to have the width of 200 pixels applied to all of them, what I could do is I could say ID equals sunset image. I could call this anything, okay? But whatever I call it, I'm going to copy and I'm going to put up into here and I'm going to paste it. Notice the color change here. Image by itself was yellow, okay? And when I pasted that, it's white, okay? For me to isolate an ID, I have to put in pound number hash, whatever you want to think of it as, but I have to put in this symbol here to be able to isolate an ID. Okay, so I save that, and when this gets rendered, it's going to be like, oh, here's an ID that's called sunset image. And then it'll look through the entire body of my document looking for an ID called sunset image. And then it will apply this style. To make sure that it worked, let's change this to 400. Come back over here and I'll hit F5, and look at that. Okay, it worked just fine. Now, if I had a different image, I'm just going to copy and paste this line, and I'm going to take this ID off. I have 2 images now. I'm going to hit F5. Okay, you can see one got the style of 400 pixel width and the other one did not. Okay, because this style only applied to IDs with sunset image. Okay, pretty slick, right? Let's do one more style here before we stop. And this one I'm going to add to the entire body of the document. So I'm just going to say body, because this one I want to apply to everything in here, not just an ID, but everything in here. And I'm just going to say text align equals center, which makes a big difference in how something looks. I'll hit F5, and all of a sudden we have this nice centered page. Okay, I probably want to take that image out. Any thoughts as to why this is showing up side by side with the other image?
Because we do now use like the enter code. I don't know. I don't remember. But
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I just have 2 images right next to each other. Okay, I might as well have them like this. If I zoom out a long ways, okay, I just have one image tag after the other. Okay, that's kind of what my document is looking like right now. I could put a breakpoint right here, or just a break, which will give us that new line. Now, this is really ugly to read, but it would render just fine, because again, Google Chrome doesn't care where I put my spaces and my enters in my text editor. But for my own sanity, I would want to put this on its own line and this on its own line, okay? So that I can see very clearly where things are at. Okay. If I wanted to add one more, I would just copy that and paste it. And that would give us 2 breaks, giving us a little space between them. Okay. All right. So we've learned how to do headers. We've learned how to do styling, which you don't have to do for any of your assignments, by the way. It's just for your own personal satisfaction. We learned how to do a paragraph right here. We learned how to put in an image. We learned how to add space between our images. We learned how to apply styling to a single image and not all of them. And we also learned how to apply styling to HTML elements as a whole. Okay. Any questions on this, you guys?
no for me. It's
Hey, we've gone through a lot of stuff. This is all awesome. I love HTML. I love CSS. Sometimes it's a love-hate relationship. I love JavaScript, and I'm excited for you guys. This was the first programming class that I ever took, and as you can see, it changed my life. So yeah, I'm excited for you guys. If you don't have any questions, I'll go ahead and let you guys go. I'll post this recording later today. And if you guys do end up thinking of any questions, just post them on the help channel in Slack. So, okay. Randy, Samuel, thanks for coming. It's good to have you guys here.
Thanks, Robert. Thank you very much.
Have a good one.
You too.